Sewing with knits can be just a little bit overwhelming if you're new to sewing. But if you've been sewing for a long time, even like I have, it can still get a little overwhelming because there are so many different types of knits and so many different options for seam finishes, whether you have a serger or not, different hems you can use, needles as well. So in this video, I'm gonna break down the most basic knit knowledge and all of my tips and tricks that I use to get the very best results when I'm sewing with knits. So we're gonna start with fabrics, and I know that there are way more types of knit fabrics than I'm gonna cover here, but what I'm gonna cover are the fabrics that I find myself sewing with the most, or the ones I find myself looking at when I'm shopping for fabric online, and just giving you a good general selection of the knits that are out there. So the first one is Viscose Jersey. So we're gonna go from lightest weight to heaviest weight. So in my opinion, the lightest weight in the knit category is a Viscose Jersey. So viscose, without getting into the whole explanation, viscose sits right between a natural fiber and a synthetic. So this being a cotton viscose, they've taken the byproduct of cotton and used a chemical process to make it into viscose. So it's from a natural fiber, but there is a bit of chemical processing that happens to get it into this fabric. But you can see it's just beautiful and drapey. The one drawback with the Viscose Jersey is it can be ever so slightly sheer. But I feel like in some of these t-shirts, it's sort of the look. This one is also a Viscose Jersey in the print, so it's not see-through, and just has this gorgeous, beautiful drape. You might have seen this one before. It used to be a robe and now it's a t-shirt. So Viscose jerseys can be a really, really great choice. I find that they're fairly easy to sew with. They press beautifully. So overall, I think would be a great choice for a beginner, and especially if it's not super form-fitting project. Viscose jersey is really, really nice to work with and to wear. The second type of jersey that I want to mention is a cotton jersey. So this is what I generally think of when I think of a t-shirt, like a store-bought t-shirt, maybe a graphic tee, is going to be a cotton jersey. It's just a little bit heavier than our viscose jersey. One drawback with cotton jersey is I do find that sometimes the edges can roll when your cut edges, but I do have a solution for that later on in the video that I will share. So overall, I find that the jersey knit category make really great t-shirts, loungewear, sleepwear. Basically, because they're lightweight, they probably won't make the best body conscious dress or anything that's really form-fitting, just because they are a bit see-through. But t-shirts and loungewear, perfect for these jersey fabrics. Next up in our fabrics is something you might have seen around, and that is called an ITY knit. So this stands for interlock twisted yarns, meaning basically that the individual yarns have been twisted before they've been knitted into the fabric. So this actually gives us a really soft, really drapey fabric that is very stretchy. So you can see the stretch of this. It has like a bounce. It's very firm. Most ITY knits are made from polyester and spandex, so that gives you this really strong recovery. You also you can kind of see the like an interlock pattern. You can see it more here. See, that is an ITY. You get those that kind of like a strong knitted pattern because of the individual fibers are thicker because they've been twisted before they've been knitted. So that is an ITY, really great. Where your jerseys, I feel like are, they're a little lighter. They're more for t-shirts. The ITY, I think you could definitely venture into bodycon dresses, pants, anything that just needs a little bit more heaviness and not as see-through. And ITY is a really beautiful choice. I think this would also make really great children's wear because it is so strong. So that is an ITY knit. next up in our fabrics is called Ponte Roma. And for so long, this fabric totally eluded me. I was so just like, had no idea exactly what it was until I really started experimenting and working with it. I love this fabric because it has such good recovery. So this is great for pants or for dresses if you are sitting and you stand up and you get that like the bubble butt kind of effect because your knit has stretched out. Ponte Roma will not do that. It has such good recovery and it's so very strong. So Ponte Roma is actually a double knit, meaning basically when it is knitted, they use 2 needles, so you do get this double thickness. It really is double the thickness of like a regular jersey. So this gives you lots of coverage, so it's great for bodycon dresses, pants, like I said, and comes in all kinds of gorgeous solid colors, as well as prints. Look at that beautiful stretch, and it just bounces right back. So this is great for any workwear as well. You could even make a really nice blazer out of a Ponte Roma, beautiful dresses, and so much more. And now let's talk about patterns, my favorite thing. So you want to make sure that you choose a pattern that is designed for stretch knits. So where you're going to find this is on the back of your pattern envelope. So right here it says suggested fabrics. This one says cotton blends, linen, seersucker, or gingham. So this is not for knits. This is for wovens. This one says in bold, pattern sized for moderate stretch knits only. So you definitely want to first choose a pattern. These are some gorgeous vintage patterns, but you want to choose one that says it's for stretch knits only. The next thing that you want to know once you've chosen your pattern is then you're going to go to choose your fabric. Well, knit fabrics stretch at all different rates of stretchiness. So you want to make sure that you choose a knit fabric that has enough stretch for the pattern. So how do you do this? It's really simple. So on commercial patterns, they will have this little measuring guide. So this one has it right on the very front. This is mostly what I see is just this little gauge kind of on the back envelope. But we're gonna use this one just because it's a little bit bigger. So how we measure the stretch is you can either follow the directions on your pattern. So this one says 4 inches of the knit you choose should stretch to here. So we're taking 4 inches of our fabric and seeing if it'll stretch to 5 1/4. So we need this much of stretch. So all I'm gonna do is just take a 4-inch section of my fabric, just hold it with my hands and just see if it stretches to 5 1/4, and it does very easily. So that I know that this fabric would have enough stretch to make this pattern. Let's try this one. You might have seen this fabric before. I've used it, and it actually has very little stretch, which I didn't realize until it arrived. So let's give this one the test and see if it would be okay. Let's see. Well, yeah, it does actually stretch, so this pattern would be okay. If your pattern doesn't have one of these gauges on it, maybe it just gives you a percentage, like it might say minimum 20% stretch. All you need to do, just really simple math here, is take your tape measure, and I would measure out 10 inches, or 10 centimeters if you wanted, or 20 centimeters, but 10 inches. And you measure your fabric, measure 10 inches of your fabric, and you want to see how far it will stretch. Will it stretch to 12? If it does, that means you have 20% stretch. If it stretches farther, like 13, 14, it's 30%, 40% amount of stretch. So your pattern is either going to have a gauge that you can actually measure, or it's going to give you a percentage. So either way, now you know how to figure it out. Now let's talk about needles. So yes, I am on the floor because I actually keep all of my needles here in this little cubby in little bags separated by type. But today we're gonna be talking about the difference between jersey and stretch needles. So if you're ever at the fabric store wondering which one you should buy, we're gonna break it down. And we're also going to talk about double needles, which can be really cool for knits as well. So both stretch and jersey needles are ballpoint, meaning the tip of the needle is just slightly rounded, so ballpoint. So it just, it doesn't pierce your knit fibers. It actually just maneuvers around the knit fibers. So this way, if you're working with like spandex or really any knit fabric, it's not piercing your fibers, which could give you a run in your knit. So both the jersey and the stretch needle are great needles for working with knits, but what's the difference between them? Well, you can go with a jersey needle. Is going to get you through the majority of your projects, especially with any of the fabrics we just talked about before. If you have any skipped stitches, so this is when, your machine will just skip a stitch, which sometimes can happen when working with knits. That's when you'll want to have a stretch needle. So in general, this is going to happen with like spandex or workout wear, or those really, swimwear. The really kind of slinky, stretchy knits are really going to need a stretch needle. But if you're, between one or the other and you're just sewing, like making yourself some t-shirts, a jersey knit is going to be really, really nice to have. I have both, and I always just go with the jersey, and I don't really have skip stitches, but if you do, then that's when you know you need to go with a stretch needle. So now for our double needles. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these when we get into hemming. But you can see I have 3 different double needles, and the only difference is the width apart of the 2 needles. So these make really great hem finishes. So you can use these when you hem your knits to get a really professional hem. And the hem also stretches. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this here in a bit, but double needles can be really, really fun. The only drawback to using double needles that I found, especially if you're working with a knit that's not like a black or a white, that you have a lot of the exact thread color on hand, because you do need you'll need your bobbin, and then you'll need 2 cones of thread for the top. And so oftentimes I'll be sewing something and it's like a weird pink color, and I don't have another spool of thread. So that's the only drawback with double needles, is you do need, a couple more things of thread, but can leave a really nice finish. So that's a good option for sewing with knits. I literally have Owen here on my lap. Now let's talk about the best stitches to use when sewing your knits. So you might be thinking that you need an overlocker or a serger in order to sew knits, and that is just not true. You can get a beautiful professional finish using your sewing machine and sewing your knits. So we're gonna go over just a couple basic stitches that you can use. So if you're just sewing your straight seams, like you're sewing your shoulder seam or your side seams or whatever, what I like to do is set my machine to a zigzag, but I drop the width down all the way. So I have my, my width set at a 1, and my stitch length is at a 2.5. Because what this slight zigzag does is give you just a little bit of a zigzag pattern, which then makes your seam a little bit more flexible, more stretchy. Because basically what we're trying to avoid is just using our basic straight stitch, because you may get broken stitches because this straight stitch just doesn't stretch at all, right? So doing this just slight zigzag gives you a little bit more of a stretchy seam. Next, when it comes to finishing your seams, you want to check on your machine, but most likely you have what's called an overlock stitch. This is exactly what it sounds. It's like an overlock, just like a serger would do, but it's something that your actual sewing machine can do. So definitely check your manual and check for the setup for the overlock stitch. You might even have an overlock foot that will help you. It helps, there's a little bar in the center that helps keep your fabric flat when you're overlocking along the edge of it. It's brilliant, and it's such a lovely way to finish off the edges of your knits without using a serger. So definitely look at your sewing machine manual, figure out if you have an overlock stitch and an overlock foot. If you don't, no worries. You can always just use a regular zigzag to finish off the edges of your knits. Okay, and now when it comes to our sergers, we do have a few more options for finishing and different decorative things that we can do. But one of my favorite stitches for sewing with knits is called the 4-thread safety stitch. I love this stitch so much that I have a whole video on it. You can check out whichever corner, I'll drop the link to it. But basically the 4-thread safety stitch uses all 4 of your loopers, and it gives you this really strong stretchy stitch, and it is so strong that you don't even need to use your sewing machine. So definitely check out the 4-thread safety stitch. The other stitch I love for sewing knits, and I use this when I'm hemming, is a flat lock. So this is what the flat lock looks like on the wrong side of your fabric. It's like really flat, and then on the front side you kind of get this ladder effect, and this is really stretchy. So I did a whole video about how to make a t-shirt using only your serger, and I do cover that flat lock hem there. So I'll drop that link on one of the corners as well to check out. But I love using my serger when it comes to knits. But again, you don't have to have a serger to get really lovely finishes. So now let's talk about hems. So we sort of got into it before with the flat lock hem. So this is like one of the really fun ways you can hem your knits. But if you don't have a serger, like there's so many different ways you can hem with knits. So this is this jersey t-shirt that I showed you earlier. I actually just whipped this up this weekend, and I decided to just use a regular old straight stitch as my hem. So knowing that this part isn't really going to be stretching at all, I just finished it off. Because it's so lightweight, I didn't want to do like a flat lock or really anything more bulky. And I didn't do a double needle hem because I only had one spool of the pink, and I didn't really feel like spinning it into a bobbin so that I could use 2 on the top threads. So I just went with a simple straight stitch, and I love it. I think that this type of hem works really well with the drapiness of the garment, right? So I think, in my opinion, just a single stitched hem can be really lovely for these lighter weight knits. Then, of course, you have your double needle that we talked about before. The other hem that I have been loving using lately with my knits is a blind hem. So you may not think of the blind hem as something to use with knits. I never did. I don't know why. I always use it on wovens. But then when I've started working with more of the Ponte Roma knits, I found that the blind hem is just a gorgeous way to hem these knits because you get the stretch. So I could never do a straight stitch hem on this because first, the fit of this dress, it's like a bodycon. This is my bond. So I need a hem that stretches. So in the single stitch hem would not work on this Ponte Roma. I mean, it stretches a little bit, but I could have done a serger, like a flat lock, but this dress is really elegant and I didn't want a flat lock like chain stitch. So the blind hem has just been working so beautifully. I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. Hopefully you can see with the black. So you can kind of see the blind hem there. So you sew the blind hem like this, and then when you open it out, it just catches ever so slightly the main fabric there. So I love using the blind hem to hem my knits, especially some of these heavier weight knits that really need a lot of the stretch. And finally, I want to share 2 tips for working with knits that will hopefully help make it a little bit more enjoyable and manageable. The first is, if you ever cut out your knit fabric and you find that the edges roll. So this happens a lot with like a cotton jersey, I've noticed a lot of times. It can also happen with a French terry, which we didn't talk about, but it's sort of like almost like a sweatshirt knit. The edges will roll so badly. And so what I like to do is just take my spray starch and literally, after you've cut out your garment, I take it to my ironing board, so I'm here with my iron. I put down my piece. Normally the sections that I'm going to spray starch are the neckline because you know, I want to make sure the neckline looks really professional. So I'll spray starch around the neck, really any of the cut edges, but like hems can be really good to spray starch. So I just lay down my cut piece on my ironing board, lay it flat and kind of smooth out the curls as much as possible. Spray a bunch of spray starch on whatever area. Usually I just do, you know, the couple inches around the cut edge. And spray starch, and then just go over it with my iron. And that will help give that area just a little bit more oomph, more body. That will then make it easier for you to sew and will definitely help stop some of that rolling that happens. So when I do this, I always lay down a press cloth on my ironing board first, and then lay my cut garment on top of it, and then do the spray starch and then press. And it does take a little bit of time, but I find it's so worth it because it does make, you know, if you have a knit fabric that rolls, it can be really hard to kind of wrangle. And so putting a little spray starch helps smooth out some of those curly edges. The second tip I want to share is not so much a tip, but a little bit more of like a thing that you can use when sewing your knits. And that is woolly nylon thread. So see how stretchy that is? It's really, really cool. So woolly nylon thread, you can use it in your sewing machine as your thread, but I like to use it in my serger. So you can use woolly nylon thread in your upper and your lower looper. You use your regular thread in your needles, but what this woolly nylon thread does is fill in your serger stitches. So you get a nice like filled in overlock. So if you have any knit fabrics that you know, shed, like they kind of lose some of their lint, this can be really great at giving you a nice filled in serger stitch. Also, if you have sensitive skin and you like using a serger, but regular serger thread is just a little bit rough on your skin, woolly nylon thread used in the upper and lower looper gives you such a soft seam. It's incredible because it's super, super soft. I wish you could feel this thread because it's really, really soft. You can just kind of see the loftiness of it. Owen definitely approves of the softness. So get some woolly nylon thread and give it a try in your upper and lower loopers. It can be really fun to use when you're sewing with knits. All right, that's it for me today. If you liked this video, please consider giving me a like. It definitely helps as I grow my channel. And please consider subscribing to my channel if you'd like to see any of my future videos. And until next time, bye.